Thank you for all four of you for an incredible presentation. I've been thinking these panels a little bit about silence, and how we think silence in relation to think that silence, in fact, is the absence of sensory. For instance, is it, the silence throbbing is something, dense, something powerful. We talked about resonance. We talked about this kind of connection of echoes. But how to think then about this kind of blindness in a way. And I was thinking about the black you were talking about, right? And I don't know if the silence that fell from the audience every time was when they were looking at the flags. I forget the sequence of events you were talking about. Yes, but I thought that was really relevant and really telling, right? Especially silence in opposition to this kind of excessive sensoriness. And I'm thinking back on Ceiling's drama earlier, right? This drama. And so how do we think all of those elements together? I would be interested in hearing your input on that.
I just start saying I don't have an answer, but you point out something we were discussing that we discussed many times with those. The fact is that just for our way of trying to build a sort of resonance between our two works, is that among the things we listed, there was the weight and the touch and the weight. There was the way the perception that changes the landscape, the two things we talked about here. Another thing was silence that happens during fieldwork, in the ways people start talking about something and then they do not talk anymore, and they just come up with something. And there is many moments we have listed many things. Among these things, there was silence, and we didn't take it because of the 20 minutes thing. Just because it's difficult to say something about silence, but we wanted to bring it, as you mentioned, in this first scene in which the weight was not in there, or the focus was not on silence, but on the presence, and the presence through silence. So just to say, I would definitely see silence as a way of sensing, of seems to me very, very evident. Yes.
Yes, I mean, in fiction, I mean, the silence, of course, is absolutely crucial. So it vibrates. It has its musicality of its own. So it's definitely not the absence of sound. And it is almost a sound in itself. Sometimes people say that the color, white or black are not colors. This, it doesn't make sense. Such as silence not being a sound, that it doesn't make sense. It's only because of silence that you can hear everything else. And so it has this resonating capacity in itself. And I think it's particularly palpable in Harold Pagazan's prose also, which is, I mean, this is also why I had selected, so many quotes. That was probably a bit too long. But he has extremely long, sentences that are very musical, but that have their own weight in it. And getting into that weight is the silence and the musicality of the silence. Definitely. So it's almost as if it's not only an auditory thing, not auditive or audio, but also palpable. So it deals with touch as well. It has touch.
For me, silence is very important because what the point I'm trying to make is that eloquent silence, because like in the novel that I was referring to, like Jane was constantly saying that I want to know the story of Mom, what she has gone through, but she is self-censoring because she doesn't want her daughters the life of trauma that she has gone through. Yeah, and that's what prompted Jane to uncover, take up the research. On the other hand, like from a very practical point of view, like in Malaysia, that as I'm saying, because like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, we are like swamped with Rohingya refugees nowadays. But like Malaysia is not a even an HCR signatory, and so immediately any asylum seekers seeking asylum in Malaysia become illegal. And so in that case, what happens is that technically Malaysians are kind of instructed not to talk about them because it is illegal. So they are not recognized even. And like the boats are being pushed back. Very recently, there are like 2 boatloads are being pushed back from Aceh, yeah, in northern Malaysia. But mainstream media does not reflect much on that because they are illegal. People don't talk about it. Yeah. But like those voices are lost, and the lives that are getting lost are also being suppressed. No counts, no knowledge, nothing has been talked about. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, what I'm seeing very recently, like whatever is happening in the Middle East now, like from the government level, I'm not taking any stance here, I'm not making any political point here, but what I'm saying now, like because Malaysia is not a signatory, they are not allowing people to talk about them. But on the other side of the world, when a particular group of people being prosecuted and which has some sort of like a religious similarity with Malaysia, like from the higher education department, they are trying to promote, like, okay, we have to like commemorate, or no, we have to like kind of observe a solidarity week. So there are politics going on, which voice should be given like space and which voice should be suppressed. So that is what I'm trying to say, is that like people, particularly vulnerable people in need of shelter, in need of like space to survive, should be seen as human beings, not by particular race, culture, religion, whatever they are. So all the voices need to take space. And that's why I think this storytelling is very important.
I really enjoyed this panel a lot. So I think my first quick question is for Judith, because I think you mentioned about how Christian found his expectations was actually misplaced. And I think you mentioned very briefly how he found the hometown of Rani is actually very different of his original hometown, right? I think I want to know more about this. How will you elaborate on the difference between the 2 hometowns, where Christian is from and where the woman is from, right? I think, yeah, this is the first question.
Yes, it's mostly, I mean, that opposition between, the South, that was more, Sinhala dominated with Colombo, particularly, and the Northeast, that was, more Tamil or Tiger, territory. So she belongs to the Northeast. So it's quite a trip, in fact, even after the war. It's quite a trip, even symbolically and physically, but also symbolically, quite a trip to go from Colombo to the Northeast. And in fact, for him, it's complicated by the fact that when he was in India, and he was hoping that he could somehow reconnect with Sri Lanka, reconnect with his people, and he was dreaming of a kind of political engagement that would, give him more meaning, in fact, to his life. He went to the Northeast. And so he took up a small job, badly paid job in the Northeast at an NGO. And then, did that for a few years and then went back to Colombo, down south, in order to be reunited with his family. And also wanting to know what he was going to do with his life. So for him, I mean, there is that kind of, disconnection also between South and the Northeast, also, which is a very political disconnection. The trip is also an attempt at reconnecting both sides of the island.
Thank you for providing more background information. I think it's very important. Thank you. And so my second question is actually for Caroline. And
Could we maybe, because we're running out of time,
Okay.
so just, maybe just one question, yeah. Celine?
Thank you for Caroline as well. It's about North Korea, the songs. Sorry.
Was my mistake saying North
Yeah, I was just hypnotized by it. So this is about the presentation on the remains. I'm wondering if these remains were recruited in any way to either challenge or reproduce nationalist discourses, very much like what happens with comfort food.
It is a very central issue. Indeed. There are several groups who take care of these remains. The ones I'm focusing on, for them, so just to give a brief context, the remains, they come from a country that was chosen and that was colonized by Japan. And after the colonization, it was divided between South Korea and North Korea. So the dead, they are from Chosun, they are neither from South nor North. But so for some two groups, mostly I'm focusing on, it's their indivisibility is very central, because one purpose of the group is to bring together North and South Korea, and also Koreans from Japan. So they try mostly not to assignate the remains to one border or the other. So it's very central for them to refuse, but they refuse this assignation also because there is strong pushes to assignate them on one side. But there are also other groups, for example, that bring the remains back in South Korea, for example, wrapped in a South Korean flag. That was not obviously, so for example, these groups, sometimes they bring them back wrapped in a white cloth or in Blue Bay Peninsula flag, which is a symbol of pro-Pacific reunification. So I'm stopping there, but clearly it's a very strong issue.
Right, so it's okay, we're going to continue the discussion over lunch. We need to resume again at 2:30 for Catherine's keynote. She'll be joining us via Zoom. So thank you everyone for coming. So lunch is outside. You can just pick